I think we're good, Deborah.
Okay. We would like to then call the Butte Choice Energy Authority Board of Directors regular meeting September 28th, 2020 to order. Ashley, could you do a roll call, please?
Yes. Director Teeter?
Here.
Director Brown, I am aware is absent, as well as Director Huber. And Director Schwab, as an alternate, is here. Is that correct?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Thank you. And Chair Lucero.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
All right. So on to our...
I know this is just a technicality, this is Harriet, but I would note that this is a special board, not a regular meeting of the board.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, it says regular, but you're right. It is a special meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's okay. That's a good distinction. All right, so on to our special agenda for our special meeting. A, under our regular agenda, is to receive the City of Oroville BCE load analysis and provide direction regarding potential next steps with the City of Oroville. The requested action is to provide direction to staff to work with the City of Oroville or not regarding membership with BCEA. Okay, and who has taken that one?
Yeah, this is Brian, and I'll kick it off. And we have Dennis Vermette from Pilot Power Group, PPG. They did the work on this, but I'll kind of do a quick summary on this. And if you have any questions, this kind of goes for both item 2A and 2B. I'll kick them off, and then if you have any detailed questions, I know Dennis is available on the call. But so as you all recall, the City of Oroville did request they sent us a letter a while back requesting to be included in Butte Choice Energy, and per our JPA agreement, part of the process here is to do a load analysis on their data, on their PG&E load. So consistently, this is actually, and this was done when we did our initial feasibility study back in 17-18. That included the City of Oroville and the Town of Paradise, and at that point in time, they were both deemed to be viable partners in this group. So not surprisingly, I think the information that you'll hear about here supports that trend. So we did do an analysis on the data, and we had to make some assumptions for this, and the assumption was that it was a 2022 launch date. And again, we'll talk about that more, I think, in the next item, but we did have to made an assumption there that we would launch at some point in 2022. And the discount range is from 0% to 2%. And what that is, that's the discount from the PG&E rates that we would provide to our customers. And again, that's something as we get closer to an actual launch date, buying energy, setting rates, those types of questions or those types of issues would be resolved at that point in time. But overall, the findings were positive. The revenue that this would provide to us, it's about a 16% increase in load, would provide about a little over $11 million in additional revenue over 5 years. Overall, there are a few things that would increase in cost, and those are things such as some costs are associated by meter, so you have data management, customer service, noticing, those types of things would go up a little bit. However, with that increase in revenue, it would actually spread out a lot of our fixed costs for staffing and consultants and power management. Those types of things are much more expansive costs. So by adding more customers and more revenue, it makes those costs essentially go down a little bit per megawatt. So overall, the addition of the City of Oroville continues to be a good choice, a good financial choice for BCE. Obviously, what that does do is we have 4 board of directors right now. We have 2 from the County of Butte and 2 from the City of Chico. What this would do is it would add 2 more board members right now, 2 from the City of Oroville. So again, one of these things with community choice programs, obviously, we talked about having the City of Oroville included all along, but that's something that you add more dynamics to the group. But that in a nutshell is a quick summary of the analysis. It does look like it would be financially helpful to the organization to include the City of Oroville. So if this board wishes us to proceed forward on that, we can work with the city of Oroville. There are a number of things that they would need to do. They need to pass an ordinance that would allow them to form a CCA. They'd have to agree to the JPA agreement that we have in place. And then if we launched in 2022, again, which we'll talk about more later this evening and really in great detail on October 12th at our next regularly scheduled meeting, we'd have to have an implementation plan done at the end of this year, which would include the city of Oroville. So there are a number of things we need to do to work with them. So I'll turn it over to this board for any questions. And Dennis, did I miss anything critical on that?
No, I think you covered off all the major pieces. You made my job easy, so
Well, good.
thank you.
You bet.
Does the board have any questions?
Deborah, this is Ann Schwab. I do have one question, probably because I'm an alternate, not too familiar. But how do the two entities share costs right now? Is it proportionate to population, or, the reason I ask that is how we would share costs with the city of Oroville.
So right now, as far as the costs go, the city of Chico and actually the counties has expended significant costs on the feasibility study that the county will get reimbursed should BCE ultimately proceed and become an entity and launch. And then for after the feasibility study, all the work that we've been doing for implementing has been split 50-50 with the city and the county. And what we could do with the city of Oroville is we could request that they also, right now the city of Chico and the county are about 50-50 for the energy load. And again, all these costs will be reimbursed once BCE launches and goes live. So it's essentially a loan from the city and the county at this point in time. But we can certainly engage the city of Oroville to have some quote skin in the game and also help contribute based upon their percentage of load. If that was a desire of the board, we can make that we can request that.
Okay, thank you for the information.
Hey, Brian, I do have a question. I noticed that, there's discussion about Oroville's loads and revenues and incremental costs, but I didn't see, and maybe I missed it, is there a comparison of Chico County rates with and without Oroville?
As far as the energy rates, and again, Dennis, maybe if I screw this up, let me know. But as far as the rates go, again, what we've been planning on doing is, and this is further down the road, but the rates would go down a certain percentage points per megawatt hour. Our cost would go down, I should say. And then ultimately, what we would end up charging would be a decision made by the board at a later date, because we'd have to decide, what type of a discount program are we looking at offering our customers, whether it's a 0.5%, 1%, 2%, or some entities actually have programs out there where they just mirror the PG&E rates initially, and then at the end of the year they do a kind of like a true up where they then give credits back to their customers. So it does lower the megawatt hour, and I think that was actually, there were some examples of that in the data analysis on.
Well, I guess go ahead.
No, the only thing I can add is that between the county, Chico, and Oroville, as a customer, either residential or commercial customer, all the customers would be provided the same rate schedule. So a residential customer in Oroville would be the same as Chico or the county. So there is not separate rate schedules, so everybody's going to get, I guess you want to call it, painted with the same brush. Where the benefit, which Brian was referencing, is that with additional load, it would bring down some of your fixed costs because they're getting spread across a larger amount of load for the CCA.
Right. Okay. I'm just wondering, taking in light 2A and 2B, there's a lot of, I guess what I'm asking is, are we making this decision right now? You're requesting action to provide direction to staff to work with the city of Oroville. Do they understand that there's
You know, so this is and we've had some discussions about this at the staff level, and we think that we certainly we're having dialogue with the city of Oroville, and ultimately I've had a lot of dialogue with them today on this matter, and ultimately I said, you know, come the 12th, there'll be some significant decisions made whether or not it makes sense to launch in 2022 or even push this out further based upon the variables and the climate we're looking at right now. So they're aware of that. So, but what we could do is have a parallel path. Just even if the launch date is pushed out due to a number of variables, adding the city of Oroville now can still be done, and that way that part of the entity itself is established and ready to go. But you're correct. So it's kind of like there's two paths going on right now. Obviously, considering the city of Oroville as entering into this entity, but at the same time, we're then looking at, you know, what's the best options for this organization moving forward as far as launch date. Is it going to be 20? Because we've already decided 2021 was not.
Okay, yeah, I guess I'm feeling like I still don't have enough information, you know, and perhaps at the October 12th meeting, that would, you know, we'll have a little bit more detailed information to make decisions. But what you're asking us right now is to say, yeah, go ahead and work with Oroville with the realization that we still haven't come to the conclusion that we're going to move forward with a launch date.
That's correct.
You're asking 2022.
Correct, and that's just the assumption that was used in this, but that doesn't mean that we're
And
obviously.
they are aware, sorry, this is Sean, they are aware that there's the potential that 2022 date could push further back. But that doesn't appear at this point to have deterred their interest in membership.
Got it. Okay.
Two seconds.
All right. So I would entertain a motion to provide direction to staff to work with the city of Oroville or not.
So moved. That's Doug.
Okay. To
And
go
this,
ahead and work with.
this is Ann Schwab, second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Can we
Aye.
Got
Aye.
public comment?
Oh, I guess we should do a roll call. I'm sorry, Ashley. Go ahead and do a roll call.
Can I get clarity on the motion first? I just want to make sure the motion is, because I know in the recommendation that we're requesting, or the analysis was to move forward or not to move forward. I believe I heard to move forward, but I just want to make sure. Was that your motion?
Move forward.
Move forward. Okay.
Strike the or not.
Or not.
There you go.
Got it.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay, we can continue with a roll call vote. Director Schwab,
Aye.
Director Teeter,
Aye.
Chair Lucero,
Aye.
and motion carries 3 with 1 absent.
On to item B, update on BCE financial projections with potential inclusion of the city of Oroville. Requested action is to receive the update on key variables included in the updated pro forma, the underlying assumptions and preliminary financial projections, assuming inclusion of city of Oroville with BCE.
Okay, and I'll kick this one off yet again, and it's certainly Dennis is he's done a lot of work on this, and he's going to continue to do a lot of work on this in the next couple of weeks. I think in a perfect world we would have liked to have a more healthy, meaty discussion tonight, but ultimately there's just a lot of variables to consider here that we'll go over. But so part of the direction that was given to us back in August was to refresh our pro formas and really looking at 2 of the variables that were of concern that raised the costs that tightened the margins, so to speak, were the PCIA, the Power Choice Indifferent Adjustment Fee or exit fee, as well as the local cost for resource adequacy. So those are 2 variables that continue to be a concern for us with PPG looking at our pro forma data. Now, with that said, right now the PCIA is slated to go down in 23-24, which could be helpful. The rates that exit fees slated to go down, be decreased. Now, with these 2 variables, again, the margins are very tight, but there are a number of mitigations or levers or options that can be assessed that could potentially make this more feasible. So what we're going to do the next 2 weeks before the October 12th meeting is vet out a number of things, and I'll go over these really quick. But rate discounts, again, do we want to do any sort of a discount for customers? Do we want to mirror PG&E's rates? Do we want to do 1%, 0.5%? You know, how does that impact our pro forma? So that's one item. The amount of renewable content is another one. And again, I know we've talked about having 3 different plans in our portfolio options for our consumers to have that customer choice. One that meets the state minimum requirement, the RPS, and then we had 2 other potential options that were greener or higher in clean energy, renewable energy, which have a higher cost. So we could talk about, you know, what our power mix looks like. A couple other items to consider again is launch year, and as I just alluded to a few minutes ago, in light of the PCIA projections to go down in 23-24, how did things look in 23-24 versus in 2022? So I think we're going to look at that we're going to analyze those that criteria. Also, timing of launch within a year. Do you want to launch in the springtime or do you want to launch in the fall? Because there are certain technicalities with how much resource adequacy your RA costs depending on when you launch. So we want to look at, okay, if you launch in the spring, what happens? If you launch in the fall, what happens? Then there's a couple other phase-in matters. As far as residential and commercial, the RA costs are higher or needed more for commercial because, again, they have a higher energy load. So if you consider phasing in residential first, you know, how does that impact your pro forma? The NEM, net energy meter enrollments, that's basically those who have solar. Those customers have a tendency to be a little bit higher operating costs because of the coordination with their solar, and then obviously there's also a buyback of the energy that they overproduce. So there's could be some considerations about how those customers are rolled in, and then frankly, a slew of other just operating costs that we've included in our pro forma, from hiring staff to renting a building to our consultant costs. We're going to really look at that here in the next 2 weeks. So I know I just covered a lot of variables, a lot of moving parts, and the idea here tonight was, okay, here's the moving parts that we've identified. What we wanted to do is basically tee this discussion up for the board to have a very healthy discussion on October 12th, because in our minds, we really need to make some decisions on October 12th. If we're going to launch in 2022, we need to get on the ball as far as the financing goes. Again, that was an issue we had last time, and frankly, the credit as Michael Burwanger with PFM alluded to at our last meeting, the credit market hasn't changed significantly, and it's probably not going to change in the near future with the pandemic that we're in. But with that said, if we are going to launch in 2022, we got to get on the ball to get our credit lined up early on in 2021. So these are a number of things. We're going to come back and we will have a lot of options for the board to consider. I think at that point in time, we'll even have some recommendations for the board to consider as far as would we recommend launching in 2022? Would we recommend launching in the springtime, the fall? Look at these number of variables, or do we think it's in the best interest of this entity to kick it out to maybe 2023 when the PCIA starts to go down a little bit? So a number of variables there. And Dennis, what else is there to add into this discussion?
No, I think you covered it all. Like I say, I think the idea is to sort of bring you a matrix of options to get a sense of what variables have been changed or modified to be able to provide the best, outcome for the CCA, and that's kind of the agenda ahead of us, or ahead of me to work on.
So if go ahead. First, I should ask you, does the board have any questions about any of these options?
This is, excuse me, Ann Schwab, just questioning if there is hesitation going into the program. Will there be red flags once we're in the program, or is it just the initial setup that there's some hesitancy going forward?
I think right now with the resource adequacy cost has gone up. I think it's tripled in the last 18 months. And the PCIA costs have gone up significantly, but we know the PCIA, that continues to be a battle with the investor-owned utilities and the CPUC. we do know, at least the way it is right now, it's scheduled to go down. But to answer your question, the margins, at least that we've looked at so far, look pretty tight, very, very tight the first couple of years, and they get better in the further years out, as that PCIA cost goes away, the exit fee goes away. So it does look tighter in the beginning, first couple of years, and then it looks better in the farther out years, and that's where we're really going to analyze this and say, okay, does it make sense then? What's the risk look like in launching in 2022 versus 2023? Because we want to make sure we obviously do the best thing for this organization and our the residents that we're going to be serving.
And then I guess the other question would be, what would the cost of getting out of it be?
Well, the costs, once we start purchasing energy, obviously we're not going to want to purchase energy unless we can sell it at or below the cost of what PG&E is selling it for. So ultimately, if we were to start down this road and then decide when we go out for an RFPs for energy that we can't compete with PG&E, then at that point in time, I'm speculating, but at that point in time, I would think the board would say, well, if we can't compete with PG&E, then we're not gonna proceed, and then that would mean we'd have to unwind all the things that we've done. We have our fixed costs right now that we're spending right now with our consultants to help move this thing forward. But those would be we wouldn't spend the millions of dollars necessary on the electricity purchase unless we knew for sure that we can compete.
I'm just thinking of something like CalPERS. Yes, it sounds like a great idea, but if we ever wanted to change it, it's virtually impossible to get out of it, or it costs as much to get out of it as to stay in it.
Well, and one thing is we just can't get credit right now. You know, that's a huge issue.
Yeah.
The second thing is that I think what you were really asking is how much does it cost us to date and how much will we be out? And that's, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but right now we're at about a $600,000 budget. Is that correct?
That's our budget. I don't have it right in front of me. I can pull it up here, but we are into this probably about $300,000 right now. I know the feasibility study was about 95, and I think over the past year or so, I think the county and the city have each pitched in $100,000 for the last year and a half for the work that's been done. So we're in it about $300,000 right now, but the city and the county have each agreed to pay $300,000 initially, and again, those costs would be recouped, obviously provided that the entity is actually launched and
So that would
And
be
it's actually, it's a little more than that. It's probably pushing up towards 375 now, because you've got invoices still coming in and, to be paid and stuff. So, I mean, I think to be safe, it would be, a better estimate would be around 375 so far in expenses.
And the point is that we had about $600,000 originally budgeted, split between Chico and the county.
Correct.
Okay. So
Mayor Schwab, this is
my-
Eric. So that's what we would be out. It's just on the city side would be our share of the 350,000 that we originally budgeted for to contribute. Those are fixed costs.
Okay.
yeah, and I have the latest the expense detail. We've spent $385,000 to date, but that includes the feasibility study. So as I guess Sean referenced, we're approaching $400,000.
So I have a question regarding, that there's discussion about, basically what we're trying to do here, if I'm reading this all correctly, is we're trying to make our financials look better. So in order to make them look better, if we're not going to be engaging the NEM enrollments, these are if I'm understanding correctly, the solar, the folks who generate solar. I think, we are going to have somewhat of a PR issue, with that, because obviously the NEM development and local generation might not look too good if, we're saying, oh, we'll do that later. And then, I'm just curious about lowering the amount of renewable in the resource portfolio. I know that again, what we're trying to do here is make it less expensive to purchase. But my understanding is that 98% of the customers usually take minimum renewable options, and particularly in our area. So, you know, would we want to do that and reduce renewables? You know, if 98% of the folks do that already, you know, again, it's a PR consideration. So I'm just wondering, in this next round, October 12th, if we're going to have a comparison both ways. You know, here it is with, you know, your NEM enrollment. Here it is with your renewables, as we had discussed, and here it is, you know, with this pared down version that would help us get to a place with our financials that might look better to an institution. I guess that's my question.
Yep. And the answer is absolutely. We're gonna look at these 7 variables and come back with a handful of scenarios. And I want to assure you that we're not trying to do anything. You're right. These things are all levers that could reduce the costs, but we're not doing anything to. If we don't feel comfortable with this, we're not going to recommend proceeding forward. I can assure you of that. But these are variables that do lower the cost. And the phase in or rollout of the NEM, those participants, I can say, and I think Sean and probably Dennis can speak this better than me, but I've seen that in other CCAs that they typically do. That's actually a normal practice that they've done. And I do appreciate the fact that, and I think you're right, some solar customers who want to participate now will be disappointed that if that was something that wasn't initially available to them, but I think it's a pretty common practice.
Okay, and then my other, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Dennis, sorry.
Yeah, no, the only thing I was going to add to that was that a lot of the CCAs do roll on the NEM customers at a later date, primarily because of their true-up period. So do they want to get through the true-up? Because generally how PG&E structures their NEM customers is that even though they get a bill every single month, and if they are net generators of electricity, meaning they generate more than they consume, they in turn sort of bank that potential revenue on their invoice or their statement. And then if there was times where they basically consume more than they generate, that becomes the offset. But there is a date that is specified for each account that they basically true up the thing. It's either they owe PG&E money or PG&E owes them money, and it's generally where the expense comes for BCE is that if there is customers that generate more than they consume, the attraction for the CCAs is that they're offering up what we refer to as sort of the retail rate of the cost of that the generation versus the wholesale rate. So the utilities pay normally a wholesale price which is substantially lower than what you would pay for your electricity. So it's natural to have it sort of delayed slightly to get all your non-NEM customers on board first, and then you roll in either quarterly all your NEM customers as their true-up period kind of comes up with the utility.
Okay, all right. And then my final thing is, you know, I'm part of that group started by Sam Licardo, you know, down in San Jose, that wrote a letter to the CPUC about the PCIA costs. And I saw somebody sent me, and I think it was part of that movement where the PCI costs, you know, the PG&E's eligible portfolio, that their costs weren't really going down significantly until 2026. And so I was just wondering if that is going to be part of this presentation on the 12th, where we get an idea of when that PCIA is really going to be going down, and, you know, can we meet that narrow margin?
Let me speak to that. So one of the with the PCIA, and again, the anticipation is that it's eventually going to kind of go down. We're anticipating that it's going to go up, obviously for 2021 and 2022. and then eventually it kind of peaks and then is going to roll off. There are several studies out there as to where the PCA is going to land. And, you know, I guess being either, is it 2025, 2024, 2026? You know, I mean, again, none of us have that insight into the PCA. Unfortunately, it's a bit of a black box for everybody, except for the utility, and they don't seem to quite share how that all is calculated out for obvious reasons. So, but definitely we can, you know, provide more insight as to where we think that roll-off is going to be in the PCA.
You know, Dennis, it would be great, because I have heard it consistently at 2024, and so we should, Chair Lucero, I'd like to go back and double check. I've not heard about the 2026, I've always heard 2024, and I think that is one of the things that we will be bringing back to you on October 12th, is not only the pro formas with the different levers and the different sort of scenarios to show what the incremental savings might be with some of these things, but also 10,000-pound gorilla in the room is no doubt PCIA. And it's scheduled, as I understand it, to drop off precipitously in 2024, which potentially dramatically changes the calculation for you guys, such that, you know, the first 2 years wouldn't be so difficult because you potentially defer launch. But it's true, and I'm dealing with another client that's bringing on a Central Valley customer, and they, as a community, and they already know that they're going to have to basically absorb a loss for 22 and 23. And they want to do that because they have enough money to do that, and they see the long-term value of the revenue. That doesn't mean that BCE has to do that. And so these are all the things that we'll be bringing back to you guys for options. And there are other options too that Brian, you know, may wish to discuss. But we're starting to work on setting it up in a way so that you guys have some specifics in front of you to make a solid choice. So that is all coming to you.
Great. I know it's just so hard because it's like part crystal ball and, you know, part, I just don't want to get off on the wrong foot with something like this, because I think it is ultimately really great for our community, but, you know, we don't want to start off in a hole.
Yep, fair enough.
Totally agree.
Let's see. So that was really just information, correct?
Correct.
All right. So do any of the board members have any other questions?
I just have a comment. I think, you know, being cheaper than the IOU is the key thing for me. And the mitigation levers to discuss, I think whatever makes that a reality, you know, a minimum RPS, I think is desirable, at least initially, until there's enough customers that say they want a higher RPS. And then I think delaying the NIM customer enrollments might be a wise thing, unless some of our experts can convince me otherwise. But why should we start paying net energy metering customers money if we don't have to? Seems like a cost or a risk. So my thought is we need to give our businesses lower power. And it might entertain other businesses to come here if we have something to offer. And then our residential customers get that benefit as well. So that's my 2 cents on it.
No, I think we all feel that way. I'm just bringing up these other issues that I know are issues for other CCAs that I've spoken with. And if we can't offer, you know, that 2% that we've been talking about, that's really becomes the question.
Agreed.
Okay, I think we have our marching orders to come back with a number of scenarios, but I am hearing that the obviously the cost for consumers is a key variable, and and again the NIM enrollments there's a cost associated with that, but then there's also the true up. So I mean that might work out well just by delaying that. And again, I know it's common for startups, so we'll come back with a at least a few different options here to look at based upon the feedback we got tonight.
I guess the question
Okay, thank you.
is, sorry, I got one more question. What is the percentage of NIM customers?
I think that's in our data. Do you have that, Dennis, off your?
Dennis has that.
Yeah.
I may have that. Give me 1 second here.
I know that while he's looking, I can tell you that it's significant enough for Dennis to have suggested it as a potential cost savings in the first few years. Of, like almost $1 million or something. But that's from them.
From a volume, it's in the analysis, the volume that it's actually contributing. It's roughly about almost 6,000 megawatts a year. From a customer standpoint, and I can bear with me. I may have that in a different spreadsheet. Why don't I email the answer to that to Brian, and then he can forward that on.
Sounds reasonable.
That would be great. And does that, Dennis, include just Chico, or does that also take into consideration Oroville and the county?
That was just Oroville. So I do have that information for the county and Chico as well. I can put that in the same email.
That would be
when
great.
we did this, when we did the study, we just sort of focused on Oroville just to keep that isolated. But I will definitely send that information on to Brian. He can forward it on to everybody.
And I'll say one more item here, and this isn't we can talk about this more on the 12th, or we can get direction not to at all. But we did talk about, again, this has been months, if not years. I mean, there are obviously the idea of forming Butte Choice Energy was to provide more choice for our residents, our ultimate consumers of this product. There are other CCAs out there that you can join as well. So if that would be a direction this board wanted us to look into. I know previously both the Board of Supervisors and the City Council were not interested in looking at joining another CCA that already had launched and expended all these startup costs. I'm not suggesting that we do that, but I do want to throw out that is an option for the board if they wanted us to look at that. So that's something we could talk more about on the 12th as well, if there's a desire. And again, if there's a desire, absolutely not. Let's continue. We want to keep this within our region. That's the direction we received before.